The date was May 21st, 2025, or somewhere right around then. Picture this, the Oval Office, White House, the big chair, the resolute desk, all that jazz, and in this very serious room, you have two very prominent leaders. On one side, US President Donald Trump, known for his, let's say, unconventional approach to diplomacy. On the other, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, a man often seen as a measured negotiator. This wasn't just a casual catch-up over coffee and biscuits. This meeting was meant to be a big deal, a chance to steer the US-South Africa relationship onto a smoother path. Or at least that was the plan on paper, as reported by outlets like Al Jazeera and Reuters. Now, the official agenda, the one they probably printed on fancy letterhead, was all about improving ties, especially trade. South Africa, you see, had been staring down the barrel of some pretty hefty American tariffs, around 31% according to Al Jazeera, though Reuters mentioned 30%. These were part of Trump's reciprocal tax idea, so President Ramaphosa likely walked in hoping to talk business, maybe get those tariffs lifted, and generally reset the vibe between the two nations. The BBC noted that improving trade was a key intended purpose. It's like going to a family dinner hoping to talk about your new job, but you know Uncle Barry is going to bring up that thing you did in high school. But let's be real, the air in that room was probably thick enough to spread on toast. There were some serious undercurrents. South Africa's new land reform law, which President Ramaphosa had signed in January, was a major point of contention for some in the US. Then there was South Africa taking Israel to the International Court of Justice, accusing them of genocide. A move that definitely didn't win them points with the Trump administration. And if that wasn't enough, the BBC reminded us that just a few months earlier, in February, Trump had suspended critical aid to South Africa and offered refugee status to Afrikaners. So, smooth sailing was probably not the phrase on anyone's bingo card for this meeting. So, you have President Ramaphosa perhaps hoping for a constructive dialogue, a focus on economic partnership and a way to thaw the chilly relations. And you have President Trump who, well, often has his own script. This meeting was less like a carefully choreographed ballet and more like an improvisational jazz session where one musician decides to play a completely different song, very loudly. The stage was set for a memorable encounter, one that would send ripples far beyond the White House walls, and folks, memorable it certainly became, though perhaps not for the reasons Ramaphosa had initially hoped. So, the pleasantries are exchanged maybe. Perhaps someone offered someone else a Diet Coke. And then, according to reports from Al Jazeera, Reuters and the BBC, President Trump decided to kick things off with a real fire starter. He reportedly confronted President Ramaphosa directly with some extremely serious and unverified allegations that a white genocide was underway in South Africa. Imagine being Ramaphosa in that moment. You've flown thousands of miles, prepared talking points on trade and diplomacy, and suddenly you're hit with an accusation of mass murder and targeted land seizures against your country's white minority. It's quite the opening gambit, isn't it? This wasn't just a throwaway comment or a bit of rhetorical flourish from Trump. No, sir. He apparently came prepared for this particular line of discussion. He didn't just make the claim, he presented what he considered to be evidence. We're talking videos and images, a whole multimedia presentation designed to back up these explosive charges of widespread systematic attacks on white South Africans. It's like he was unveiling a very grim, very controversial documentary premiere right there in the Oval Office. The intended message was clear. He believed this was happening, and he wanted Ramaphosa to know he knew, or at least thought he knew. The atmosphere in the room, already carrying a bit of a chill, must have plummeted to Arctic temperatures. This white genocide topic, as you can imagine, was not on the pre-approved list of discussion points that diplomats usually circulate. It was a direct, confrontational accusation, one that put Ramaphosa immediately on the defensive and set an incredibly tense tone for whatever was supposed to follow. This wasn't about tariffs anymore, not at this moment. This was about the very fabric of South African society and the conduct of its government, being questioned in the most dramatic way possible by the leader of the free world. And to add another layer of complexity, or perhaps awkwardness, to this already charged situation, who else was reportedly present at this meeting? None other than Elon Musk, the South African-born tech billionaire. Reuters mentioned his presence, noting that Musk himself has, on previous occasions, amplified similar claims about the dangers faced by white South Africans. So you have Ramaphosa trying to represent his entire nation, facing these accusations from Trump, with Musk, a prominent, powerful figure with roots in South Africa, sitting right there. Talk about a high-stakes, high-pressure environment. It's a scene you couldn't make up, really. Now, when someone like the President of the United States presents evidence, you'd expect it to be pretty solid, right? Well, about those videos and images Trump showed concerning the alleged white genocide in South Africa, it turns out the evidence had some serious issues. Al Jazeera, the BBC and Reuters all dived into this, and the picture that emerged was, shall we say, less than convincing. It was more like a badly edited YouTube compilation than a smoking gun. It's like when your friend shows you a hilarious cat video, but it's actually just blurry footage of a squirrel. For starters, some of the footage that Trump presented supposedly showing white South African victims of horrific violence wasn't even from South Africa. Nope. According to reports from Al Jazeera and the BBC, some of those dramatic clips were actually filmed in the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC. Now, the DRC has its own tragic history of conflict and violence. That's undeniable. But using footage from one country's crisis to prove something entirely different is happening in another country? That's not just misleading, it's geographically confused. It's like trying to prove it's snowing in Miami by showing footage from Alaska. Then there was a particularly evocative video showing rows and rows of white crosses. Trump reportedly presented this as evidence of mass graves, a visual testament to the scale of the killings. However, the BBC and Reuters investigated this and found that these crosses were not marking actual graves of murdered farmers. Instead, they were from a protest held in KwaZulu-Natal back in 2020. Protests use powerful symbols, absolutely, but a protest symbol is not the same as forensic evidence of a gravesite. It's a significant difference, like confusing a movie prop for a real weapon. And perhaps one of the most talked about pieces of evidence was a video of Julius Malema, the leader of a South African opposition party, the Economic Freedom Fighters. The video showed Malema singing the controversial song Dubul Ibhunu, which translates to shoot the boer or kill the boer. Trump, according to the BBC, seemed to interpret this as an official government policy or a direct call to violence endorsed by the state. While the song is deeply divisive and has a very painful history, presenting a political opponent singing a struggle song as proof of state-sponsored genocide is a massive leap in logic. It's like saying a rap song about crime means the government endorses it. So, there's President Ramaphosa in the Oval Office being presented with this barrage of accusations and frankly dodgy evidence. The cameras are metaphorically flashing, the pressure is immense. It would be understandable if he got angry or flustered or started shouting back. But according to multiple reports from Al Jazeera, the BBC, and Reuters, Cyril Ramaphosa did something remarkable. He maintained his composure. He kept his cool. In the face of a diplomatic onslaught, he stood his ground, calmly and methodically, which, let me tell you, requires some serious inner strength. Ramaphosa's main counter-argument was direct and aimed at the heart of Trump's white genocide narrative. He refuted the allegations, stating clearly that crime in South Africa is indeed a massive problem, a scourge that affects everyone. But, and this is the crucial part, he emphasized that it affects all citizens, regardless of their race. He argued that it wasn't a targeted campaign against white people orchestrated or condoned by his government. The South African government, he insisted, does not support any form of racial violence, a point highlighted by both the BBC and Reuters. He then brought up a stark and tragic statistic, one that often gets lost in the emotionally charged rhetoric surrounding farm attacks. President Ramaphosa pointed out that the overwhelming majority of murder victims in South Africa are black. Reuters noted this, and it's a critical piece of context. If we're talking about who suffers most from violent crime in the country, the numbers tell a very different story than the one Trump was presenting. South Africa, unfortunately, has one of the highest murder rates globally, and it's a tragedy that cuts across all communities, but disproportionately impacts black South Africans. And then, for a bit of a visual aid of his own, Ramaphosa reportedly gestured towards his own delegation. According to the BBC and Reuters, he highlighted the presence of white South Africans within his entourage. This included prominent figures like billionaire Johan Rupert and some well-known golfers. His point was subtle but clear. If there was a state-sponsored genocide against white people, would these successful white individuals be part of his official delegation, standing with him in the White House? It was a quiet but effective way to challenge the narrative being pushed by Trump. using presence and inclusion as a counterpoint to fear and division. Section 5, Land Reform in South Africa, addressing a painful past. A lot of the anxiety and the claims Trump was echoing are often linked to South Africa's land reform policies. So it's important to understand what this is actually about, beyond the scary headlines. President Ramaphosa, during that tense meeting, also had to address this, explaining that these policies are conducted within legal frameworks. South Africa's land issue is not some new, radical idea. It's rooted in decades, centuries even, of history, specifically the brutal legacy of apartheid, where land ownership became overwhelmingly skewed. The core aim of South Africa's land reform, as Al Jazeera pointed out, is to address the deep injustices of the apartheid era. During apartheid, black South Africans were systematically dispossessed of their land. The result, a tiny white minority, making up about 7% of the population, came to own over 70% of the agricultural land. Think about that imbalance. Land reform, therefore, is an attempt to create a more equitable distribution, to give black South Africans access to land for farming, for housing, for economic opportunity. It's about trying to heal some very old, very deep wounds. In January 2025, just a few months before this Oval Office showdown, President Ramaphosa signed a significant piece of legislation. The Land Reform Law, sometimes referred to as the Expropriation Bill. This law allows the state to expropriate privately owned land for public purposes or in the public interest. Now, the part that often causes alarm is that it includes provisions for compensation, but also in certain defined circumstances, like land held purely for speculative purposes or abandoned land, it allows for expropriation without compensation. This expropriation without compensation clause is the real lightning rod for controversy. However, President Ramaphosa was keen to emphasize, and both the BBC and Reuters noted this, that this process is not a lawless free-for-all. Firstly, any expropriation under this new law is subject to legal challenge. It can be taken to court. Secondly, and this is a really important detail, at the time of the meeting in May 2025, no land had actually been seized or expropriated under this new specific law. The process was intended to be orderly, constitutional, and aimed at sustainable agricultural development and redressing past wrongs, not, as its critics sometimes portray it, a chaotic grab of white-owned farms. Section 6. Beyond the accusations, the U.S. DRC mineral proposition. Amidst the fireworks of the white genocide accusations and the subsequent rebuttals, there was another incredibly significant topic lurking in the discussions, or at least around the time of the meeting. This was something with potentially huge global ramifications, a proposed mineral deal between the United States and the Democratic Republic of Congo, or DRC. According to Al Jazeera, the BBC, and Reuters, this wasn't just a minor trade footnote, it was a major strategic play being considered, highlighting the global scramble for critical resources. So, what's the big deal about the DRC? Well, the DRC is sitting on an absolute treasure trove of minerals that are essential for the modern global economy, especially the green energy transition. We're talking about vast reserves of lithium, which you need for batteries in electric vehicles and smartphones, cobalt, another key battery component, and coltan, crucial for electronics. Essentially, the DRC holds the keys to a lot of the raw materials that will power the 21st century. Access to these minerals is becoming a massive geopolitical prize. The proposed agreement, as outlined by these news sources, was fairly straightforward on the surface. U.S. companies would gain significantly enhanced access to these vital Congolese mineral resources. In exchange for this access, the United States would commit to providing substantial infrastructure investments in the DRC. Think roads, railways, ports, the kind of development that the DRC desperately needs. Additionally, the U.S. would offer support in trying to resolve the long-running and devastating conflicts that plague the eastern regions of the DRC, where many of these mineral riches are found. This potential U.S.-DRC deal represents far more than just a commercial transaction. It signals a deeper American engagement in a region rich in resources, but also rife with instability. For the U.S., securing a reliable supply chain for these critical minerals is a matter of economic and national security. For the DRC, it could mean much-needed investment and a powerful ally in its quest for peace and development. But as with any deal of this magnitude, especially in a place as complex as the Congo, the devil is always in the details, and the potential for unintended consequences is always there. Section 7. Geopolitical maneuvers, the US, China, and Africa's riches. This potential US DRC mineral deal isn't just about digging stuff out of the ground, it's a major move on the global chessboard, particularly concerning China. For many years, China has been the dominant foreign player in the Congolese mining sector. Al Jazeera, the BBC, and Reuters all highlighted how this new US initiative is widely seen as a direct effort to counterbalance and reduce China's extensive influence over these critical mineral supplies. It's like a new contestant entering the big game show, aiming to take the lead from the reigning champion. China established its strong position in the DRC largely through what are known as infrastructure for minerals deals. Essentially, Chinese companies would come in and build much-needed roads, bridges, hospitals, and stadiums. In return, they would secure long-term contracts and access to the DRC's copper, cobalt, and other resources. It was a strategy that served both Chinese demand for raw materials and African nations' need for development, though these deals have also faced scrutiny regarding transparency and debt sustainability. This US proposal is a clear sign that America is ready to compete more aggressively using a similar playbook. By striking a deal with the DRC, the United States aims to secure its own pathway to these essential minerals, which are absolutely vital for its tech industry, its ambitions in electric vehicle manufacturing, and its broader renewable energy goals. If you want to build a green economy, you need these materials. Relying heavily on supply chains potentially controlled by a geopolitical rival like China is seen as a strategic vulnerability. So this move is as much about diversifying sources and building resilient supply chains as it is about anything else. It's about future-proofing the American economy. Furthermore, the US offering to help facilitate peace in the conflict-ridden eastern DRC is not just altruism, it's also smart geopolitics. Stability in that region would make mineral extraction easier and more reliable. More broadly, successfully contributing to peace and development in a key Central African nation like the DRC could significantly enhance American influence across the continent. It would present the US as a more engaged and constructive partner, challenging China's long-cultivated image and presence in Africa. This is the new frontier of global competition, fought not with armies but with investment and access to resources. Section 8. Trade winds or storms. Navigating US-South Africa commerce. Despite the explosive start to the meeting, President Ramaphosa's original mission to Washington, as Reuters pointed out, was very much focused on trying to reset and improve trade relations with the United States. South Africa, like many other countries, had found itself in President Trump's crosshairs when it came to trade imbalances and tariffs. So, amidst the drama, there was still a hope, however faint it might have seemed at times, to talk dollars and cents, or rather, rands and dollars. The economic relationship was too important to ignore completely. A significant point of contention was the reciprocal tariff that President Trump had imposed on South Africa. Al Jazeera reported this as a 31% tariff, while Reuters cited 30%. Whatever the exact figure, it was a substantial barrier to South African exports to the US. At the time of the May 2025 meeting, these tariffs were reportedly on a 90-day pause. This meant there was a ticking clock. If new understandings weren't reached, those import taxes could snap back into place, further straining economic ties. This pause provided a narrow window for discussion, but also added a layer of pressure. The discussions did touch upon some specific trade opportunities. According to Reuters, one proposal floated was for South Africa to increase its purchases of liquefied natural gas, or LNG, from the United States. The US has become a major LNG exporter, and South Africa has ongoing energy needs, so on the surface, this could be a mutually beneficial arrangement. It's a classic trade scenario. One country has a surplus of something, the other has a demand for it. Whether this specific proposal gained traction amidst the other more heated topics remains to be seen. Beyond LNG, the two leaders also reportedly agreed to hold further discussions about critical minerals located within South Africa itself. While the DRC deal was a separate focus, President Ramaphosa was keen to remind the US that South Africa also possesses significant reserves of minerals that are crucial for clean energy technologies and advanced manufacturing. Al Jazeera noted Ramaphosa's emphasis on this point. It was a way of saying, hey, while you're looking at the DRC, don't forget the mineral wealth and potential partnerships right here. This opened another avenue for potential economic cooperation if the political climate could be improved. Section 9. Echoes of the encounter, significance and future implications. So when the dust settled after this Oval Office showdown on May 21, 2025, what were the big takeaways? Well, it was undeniably a tense and confrontational meeting, as all major news outlets like Al Jazeera, Reuters, and the BBC characterized it. It wasn't the kind of smooth, handshaking, back-patting affair that diplomats dream of. Instead, it laid bare the deep fissures and differing perspectives that existed between the Trump administration and Ramaphosa's South African government, making for some truly uncomfortable moments on the world stage. This confrontational atmosphere didn't just spring out of nowhere. As the BBC highlighted, tensions had been simmering for a while. Earlier in 2025, the Trump administration had suspended critical aid to South Africa and controversially offered refugee status to Afrikaners. Then, in March, South Africa's ambassador to Washington was expelled after accusing Trump of promoting white supremacism. Add to this the ongoing international scrutiny of South Africa's land expropriation law and its genocide case against Israel at the ICJ, and you have a recipe for a diplomatic pressure cooker. The reactions to the meeting were telling. Former U.S. Ambassador to South Africa, Patrick Gaspar, didn't mince words, calling the encounter truly embarrassing and suggesting it was a calculated attempt by Trump to humiliate President Ramaphosa, according to the BBC. Even the Afrikaner rights group AfriForum, which has often raised concerns about farm murders and has used video footage in its advocacy, distanced itself from the specific compilation Trump presented, denying they had created it. This indicated that even groups sympathetic to some of Trump's underlying concerns found the presentation or context problematic. Ultimately, this meeting between Trump and Ramaphosa served as a stark illustration of the complex, often messy reality of international relations in the 21st century. It was a collision of domestic political pressures, historical grievances, misinformation, and the ever-present global competition for resources and influence. The events underscored the challenges leaders face in navigating these treacherous waters, especially when dealing with such divergent worldviews and national interests. What happened in the Oval Office that day will likely be studied for years as a case study in high-stakes, high-drama diplomacy, and its ripples will continue to affect U.S.-Africa relations.